Hey, I really wanted to get this video out like much sooner than than I wanted, but a lot of stuff has just happened with the whole like corruption thing, and these past 2 weeks, everything just decided to fall into my lap. But I'm glad I could finally get this out for you guys because I know damn well you've been waiting for this video for a long time. So this is going to be the second part of my alternate universe for Total Drama, which is Total Drama Action. If you have not seen the first part, whether that's the remaster or the OG video, I would highly recommend you do so, just so that you're caught up to speed and that you're not, shot in the dark with everything that happens this season. And as well as just watching action in general would also be very helpful. But anyways, without further ado, on to the show. So I'm gonna briefly go over the island special because even though not a ton happens, but there are some things to mention that change in that episode. So Courtney is no longer mad at Harold since Harold didn't rig the vote against her. Instead, that was Katie, which means Katie and Sadie would be mad at Harold. Harold does try to apologize because he does still feel bad for rigging the vote, but Katie and Sadie don't budge because that's just kind of who they are. And Harold basically just says, "Well, nothing much I can do there." As well as Ezekiel having not as much hatred towards him. Yes, he did still say controversial things and sometimes does weird things, but since he was able to get decently far, he did prove that he can withstand being around a bunch of socially minded people. So he still teams up with Lindsay and Beth, but still keeps his mouth shut about women after his little comment. Now, in terms of how the cast was determined, it's still going to be somewhat similar, as it was basically determined by Courtney stealing the balloon and then everyone falling into the water. However, I'm going to be adding two more people to the cast for this season since I felt like the original 14 was still a little small, and having 16 I feel like just rounds up even more. And those additions, as you can see, are Tyler and Noah. Tyler, I think, just makes sense since Lindsay has a big role this season, and having some character to complement hers for her story would, I think, actually help. And Noah, because I do believe he needs a second chance after, having a short run, since he has a lot of potential for, development and stuff. I wanted to throw Eva in here. It's because Total Drama likes doing the whole, like, gender balance thing, but I didn't really know how I could fit Eva into the season other than just, more of her being upset. And without further ado, on to action. So the first episode is basically the same as in Canyon. It doesn't matter. It's just, the, once again, get to know everyone introductory episode. They still do the challenge with the Godzilla monster controlled by Chef, but it still comes down to Owen breaking it because, haha, fat weight joke. And then he still wins the second part, which is that eating competition where he ends up eating all the fake food by accident. So Chris just gives him and the guys the win, but it really doesn't matter. It's just for filler basically. So moving on to episode 2, this is the Alien Movie Challenge where they have to go into the spaceship, retrieve the eggs, and bring it back to home base. Everyone goes with the same people. As for where Noah and Tyler go, Noah will stick with Owen and Izzy since he's affiliated with them, and then Tyler would go with Lindsay, obviously. But not much of changes of the end result. It would still be Trent and Gwen who still win the challenge. In terms of the elimination, it is also the exact same. Everyone gets sick and tired of Jeff and Bridget constantly making out, so they are both eliminated. Alright, now let's get the teams ready. So Gwen is captain for the Gaffers, and Trent is for the Grips. And the order is basically the same in terms of who gets selected. I think she picked Duncan. We'll just put all the team members here. Lindsay, of course, Izzy, Justin, Beth. Oh, not you. Beth, DJ, Harold, and then Lashana. So in terms of where Tyler or Noah would go, it was a bit difficult because since there's no boy girl, since that's how they did the selection. And I would say that they would actually be the last two picked because at least Harold proved that he has some sort of skill where Tyler is just mostly clumsy. Plus, this is also the guy who was scared of chickens. And yeah, I don't think no one would really like Noah because of his snarkiness. Although I believe Gwen would pick Noah simply because, Lindsay would just beg Gwen to, take Noah because of Tyler, and Gwen would just do that just to get her to shut up. So Tyler would go on the Grips, and Noah would go on to the Gaffers. All right, so episode 3, this is the one where they have to push the cart up to the sets at the top of the mountain, and with Hungry Owen, the Grips still win, so they get the advantage in the acting part of the challenge, where both Duncan and Izzy still volunteer to go for that challenge. As you all know, this is also the part where Heather gets stuck upside down from the set, where Harold also proceeds to save her. And this makes sense since Harold was the one to go up to Heather and help her out after, basically everyone hated and rejected her after, her actions in season 1. And I believe that Harold would do some sort of like second chance arc with her, because he's the one character that I feel like would actually be the one to willingly help people out, give them a second chance. I know this is not what happened in the original, but I believe this is where it could potentially start, since it really felt like that when we got to World Tour, that the whole like Heather arc thing just kind of not necessarily came out of nowhere, but it just was like, oh, there it is now. Now I feel like if we do it here, this would better help develop her time into World Tour once she starts to become a better person. So Harold would offer, the alliance to help her out, since, she's basically on the outs as well as him, Like, pretty much the only people who like Harold on the team are DJ and Lashana. But he wants to, be more of a team player instead of, just trying to rig people for the sake of, rigging. So Heather, in confession states that, as much as she, finds Harold weird, but if he's the only ally she probably can get, then, well, so be it. So they eventually start working together. And then during the challenge, Izzy still screws up, and Duncan still does very well, which gets Chef to cry, so the Gaffers win, and the Grips are sent to elimination. And it's the same result in terms of who gets voted out. It's still Izzy. All right, episode 4. So this is where the kind of dilemma with action goes, where there's like a reward challenge every other episode. So this one, in hindsight, really doesn't matter, but I believe I still should mention what happens during the challenges. So Duncan still wins the surfboarding challenge. Beth still wins the sandcastle challenge for her team with the whole friendship bracelet idea. And then the Gaffers still win the dance competition. I believe it was Lashana who did win it. In terms of, any other developments, Tyler would obviously, be talking with Lindsay, and Justin doesn't like that because, he can't have control over Lindsay and Beth. Right now it's just Beth. So he wants to, in confession, he states that he wants to try and get rid of Tyler in a way possible so that he can have more control over the team, since Tyler is kind of, blocking someone like Lindsay, who is really easily gullible and could really good to have on your side with the game. And then as for on the other side with Noah, he's having a hard time talking with everyone because, everyone just pretty much hates him. Alright, episode 5. This is the Western movie challenge one, where they have to land on the donkey, and then the if it goes to the tiebreaker, it would be the lasso challenge. Now, since the Gaffers do have one extra person, I'm going to say one person sits out. And since Duncan won, I'm going to say since Duncan won the challenge back in episode 3, he doesn't have to go. So it comes down to the 6 for each team. And to make things easier, I'm just going to say it goes to a tie. I think Noah would somehow just land on the donkey out of just pure luck, and then Tyler, despite his clumsiness, would also just land on it because of pure luck. And since Owen then chases down the donkey and grabs it, the Grips are the ones who get to catch the cattle, who are the Gaffers. But the Gaffers still come up with the same strategy to fight back. In terms of who gets caught, Heather still gets caught. I would say Noah gets caught. But ultimately, the Gaffers do fight back, and they once again win the challenge, setting the Grips to elimination. This was also the part where Trent was constantly throwing the challenge, which he still does, since he's, crazy for Gwen for some apparent reason. And this is where Justin steps in to let his team know that they got to get rid of Trent because he's, for some reason obsessed with Gwen for no reason. And, just then, vote Trent out. Okay, episode 6. You may have noticed that it's highlighted different color. That's because it's to represent the aftermath episode. This, it really doesn't matter because the elimination order was the exact same, so we're just going ahead to skip it. Plus, it doesn't do a whole lot to really influence the main storyline going on in the season. Alright, episode 7. So this is the prison break episode, and the challenges are the eating in the cell challenge, and then apparently my threat protection went off. Well, thank you, Microsoft. Anyways, so the eating challenge in the cell, and then the prison break. So Lindsay and Gwen would still do the challenge since they're both still here, and Lindsay obviously does not have a great stomach, so or weak stomach, I should say. So, okay, virus threat protection, get out of here. I will deal with that later. I'm trying to record. Anyways, so Gwen would still win the challenge because she just has the better stomach, which means they get the shovel to break out. Now, you may have noticed that in this episode, Izzy does come back because she managed to find her way back to the competition. That doesn't happen now since now we have, more people with Tyler and Noah being here. Although, as you all know, Gwen does the whole like, ow, my ankle thing because she wants, I don't know if she was trying to throw the challenge or what it was, but I believe she was because she wanted to get Heather out. But it ultimately doesn't work because, everyone is just kind of wants to win or something like that. So the Gaffers end up losing because of this after the Grips make it to the home base. So Gwen is still eliminated because of that. And all right, episode 8. So this is the virus episode where everyone starts to get, quote unquote sick. It's this one doesn't matter again. It's a reward challenge. It still comes down to Duncan and Lashana, who ultimately figure out what's going on. In terms of like anything else that would change, Noah would have some probably jokes about his allergies, and people would make fun of him for that or something like that. And then in confession, he states that like, I'm actually trying to be a better person, and this is what I get. I should, be a little. I guess it's time to be a little bit more assertive and think for myself. I would also say that he actually goes up to Heather and also has an alliance with her, since they're both kind of snarky, sarcastic assholes, and I think that would work. Only Heather not so much, but I believe since they are the most rude on the team and that they are the easy scapegoats, that they should actually look out for each other. And I would say that Heather once again approves because, well, hey, the more numbers that she has on her side, the merrier. So ultimately, like I said, Duncan and Lashana figure out and they win. And Lashana, it still does the fake cry thing to get the spa thing, which she still works since, yeah. Okay, episode 9. This is the one where they have to scare each other, the horror movie challenge. So there's two parts. The one where they have to do the scream meter, and to try to scare someone, and then there's the whole team scare for whoever wins. Since DJ still screamed like a little pussy bitch, he would still win it for the Gaffers. I mean, I don't know. This was a weird challenge because they just gave it to the Gaffers for no real good reason, even though, like, Heather and Duncan didn't, really scream or anything like that, or Harold or whatever. I guess they could try and scare Noah, but I feel like he would not volunteer at all because, he's he's kind of a wuss when it comes to. I would feel like he'd be a wuss to horror movies. So, but DJ Scream ultimately gets the Gaffers the win, and so they get to do the scaring part. By the way, one thing I forgot to mention: DJ's arc with Chef, the little illegal alliance, has been still going on throughout this whole time. I didn't really mention it because it still happens in Canyon. There's not much change that would happen there. So the Gaffers still do the same strategy with like the haunted ghost girl with Heather, and it still works pretty well until Lindsay's not the only one who gets scared, but eventually she does once. I believe it was Lashana who triggered the ghost meter device thing, which scared Lindsay. So the Gaffers ultimately win, and so the Grips are sent to elimination. But before the person who to be eliminated is announced, DJ steps up and announces, "Hey, I've been having an illegal alliance. It's unfair. I'm going to quit because I want to be a more honorable person. Okay, episode 10. Honestly, I feel like there's not really anything I need to say about this episode. This one is pretty much the most filler out of filler. It's the disaster movie challenge. Owen still gets hurt. Harold still ends up saving everyone when they're in the, I think, submarine challenge or whatever. There's not much that changes here, so I'm just gonna skip it. Okay, excuse me. Episode 11. So this is the war movie challenge. This is where Lindsay starts to take more action and assertive, which Justin doesn't like because he wants to have control, and that's mainly because now that Tyler's here, Tyler's showing more support towards Lindsay. It's giving her even more confidence throughout this competition. So he's got to find a way to get rid of him, and he believes that he can do it since Owen is really easy to bribe, and Beth. As we've seen in the original, she is willing to kind of, stand her ground against Lindsay, even if it's, over something really petty. In terms of the challenge, obviously, Harold still comes up with the idea of using chemistry for the bomb, but that's when, Heather and LaShawna come in and say, like, hey, we have the criminal right here, let him do the work because he can make a good bomb. This is when Harold gets pretty pissed because now it feels like that no one respects him on this team and that, once they lose a challenge, he's just going to be the easy scapegoat. So he kind of goes up to LaShawn to ask about this, and LaShawn is like, listen, you do have skills, but, it's better to, let someone like Duncan, who's the criminal, knows how to do bombs because, well, he's, used bombs in the past. Instead of just, slapping a bunch of chemistry together to make a bomb. That's just not how it's going to work. So they still go with Duncan with the bomb, and Harold kind of sadly accepts. I would say maybe Noah makes fun of him or something like that, and they get into a little argument or whatever, but that's about it. Now in the grips. As we all know, Izzy is not here to make that crazy, crazy bomb, and with everybody else left, there's not really anything that they could do. Maybe they come up with the same glitter bomb idea, but I have no faith in any one of these guys making a good bomb. So the gaffers still win, so that means they have to do the defending portion of the chest. And obviously this is where LaShawna drank that concoction where now she's starting to just fart all the time. So they kind of use her as a weapon for that. Then Harold obviously goes up to Duncan to tell him, like, hey, I want to be, more useful on the team, but it feels like you guys are just pushing me to the side. And then once, we lose, you're going to vote me out. And Duncan's like, not necessarily. I mean, you are, a twerp, but we just don't need you for certain parts of the challenges. And, Harold's like, I'm useful, you piece of shit. So they has a little argument, and then Duncan's like, okay, you have some value. Now can you shut up? And then, Harold's like, yeah, I'll shut up. And then he goes out to defend, but that's when they also use LaShawna's gas as a weapon, and the gaffers ultimately win because the grips ran out of time to get the chest. All right, in terms of the elimination, so originally Izzy went home here, but since he's not here, they have to go with somebody else, and this is where Justin would enact his plan. So he goes up to Owen, he bribes Owen with something and says, hey, you got to get rid of Tyler. I think he lies, saying, like, hey, he ate your leftover junk food or something. He would lie to Beth and would say, hey, not to lie to about let's say Tyler, because Beth would know that Justin's trying to do one or try to get rid of Lindsay. So he would lie to Beth about Owen, saying something like, Owen, smelled your underwear or something like that. And this would probably be a plausible lie for him to say since, Cody gave Owen her bra and he did smell it back in season 1. So that's plausible, and Beth's pretty gullible. So Justin and Owen both vote for Tyler. Beth votes for Owen. And then Lindsay would most likely vote for Justin because, she's starting to get a little suspicious of him. And then Tyler, I think she would tell Tyler to vote for Justin, but then Justin would lie to Tyler and would say, like, hey, Lindsay, she's starting to become a threat. She's very popular. I know he's your girlfriend or everything. Tyler would not budge so easily. But then he's like, Beth is also trying to lie to, trying to get you and Lindsay separated because obviously Tyler's not going to vote for Lindsay, so then he chooses to lie to about Beth. So that'd be Justin and Owen voting for Tyler, Lindsay votes for Justin, Beth votes for Owen, and then Tyler votes for Beth. So basically, Justin was trying to spread the votes out in a way to where he can lie about Tyler to not be so obvious. So in the end, Tyler is eliminated, blindsiding Lindsay in the process. She is shocked as well as Tyler is, and Justin kind of says like, Tyler, you're just, you're not that useful. You're kind of clumsy. It's no offense, and I believe that Lindsay gets really really pissed because I believe she would figure out that Justin fornicated to get rid of Tyler. Tyler, hugs her goodbye as well as her. And, Tyler says, you should, you deserve to win this. I'm definitely, a little clumsy and it just sucks what happened, but it is the game. Go win this thing. All right, episode 12, Aftermath. Not much real changes outside of, maybe a segment with Tyler after what happened. So, yeah. Okay, episode 13. This is where Courtney comes back. That's why she's here. And despite the Grips getting the lead in the start, since Owen is stuck in the vault, where he still goes crazy hungry, and because of that, Beth is able to get Owen out. But now on the gaffer, since Noah's here, I would say that Noah could help out Duncan in terms of fornicating the code in terms of the vault, since he's very, very smart. Duncan would not be on board with this at first, but, Heather and LaShonda would basically say, hey, to Harold's point, we should be more of a team, even though her and Harold just got done fighting in a little pity fight. And because of this, Duncan and Noah work together to crack the code for the vaults, which gets LaShonda out. So LaShonda now joins them this time. And because since Owen is psycho for food, slows down the Grips still, and that means the gaffers get to Courtney first. And which means that the Grips now get Courtney as the consolation prize. Then the second part is the go-kart escape. Gaffers would still get the lead because you got guys like Duncan, obviously. Noah is probably smart in terms of making the car with in terms of the mathematics and schematics with it. Same with Harold. Their car still breaks down, but since the Grips do not have anyone who would be good at this, so that's why they have the mangled mess. Eventually, they crash right before the finish line, where the Gaffers still win. And the outcome for the vote is still the same. Courtney has that little bullshit immunity for coming back when she sued the show, and Owen still ends up going home because of that. Okay, episode 14. This is once again an immunity challenge, or not immunity, a reward challenge, so nothing really changes here. Since the Gaffers have 5 people, I'm going to say that this is how it works. Since Duncan was caught cheating during the fire portion where he used the lighter, I'm going to say he's auto exempt out of the second part, which means that these would be the 4 who go up against each other in the battle. So Beth and Heather still go up against each other. Justin and Harold still go up against each other. And Courtney originally went up against Duncan, but that didn't happen. And then I believe LaShonda. These were the fights. So, in terms of who wins, LaShonda obviously beats Lindsay. Beth beats Heather. These two go to a tie, since they both fall in. And there's no way in hell that Noah is beating Courtney. So, in this universe, the Grips would actually win. No. Yeah, that's right. The Grips would win since it's 3-2 in terms of the fights here. Instead of the Gaffers, we got the rib dinner. Or actually, I'm pretty sure the Grips actually got the rib dinner, but who cares? Okay, episode 15. This is the sports movie episode. And since the Gaffers, once again, have 5 people, whoever's just the weakest in terms of performance would just not be part of the challenge whatsoever. So that would obviously be Noah. Plus, you would be happy about it because you know his whole thing about I don't want to play sports kind of thing. And I think everyone would just kind of let him be because he's just being a real douchebag. But you know, also he did. But to Harold's point, he'll say like, "Hey, you know, let's not completely bash him. He did uh, help get Lashana out of that last challenge, you know." So the competitions are still the same. So it's Harold and Lindsay during the boxing portion, Beth versus Heather in the badminton, Courtney and Duncan in the wrestling, and then Lashana and Justin doing the slam dunk contest. Harold still wins, Beth still wins, Courtney still wins, and then Lashana would still win hers. So it goes to the tiebreaker, which is the cheer thing, and the Grips would still win since they sucked up to Chris. This is obviously also the part where everyone figures out about the dirt that Lashana has been filing on everyone. So that would get everyone pissed off. And then now the Gaffers are sent to elimination. And in this universe, I actually think it's going to be a little bit different. So Duncan would go to Harold and be like, hey, you know, listen, I know that you like Lashana, but she's a huge threat. And come on, she spilled all that dirt on you. Like, she did you real dirty, my guy. And, you know, we got to look out for each other since, you know, Noah's kind of being, you know, a suck up to Heather. With them working together, so these two, we gotta, you know, keep our heads up, and we have to get rid of Lashana because Heather is. If we get rid of Lashana, that's a huge threat gone, and you know, all we really have to worry about is Heather from the time being. Harold is, of course, very hesitant about this, but Duncan says like, well, it's most likely going to be either you or her, you know, doing that kind of threatened thing. I would say Heather also goes up to Harold because obviously Heather would want to get rid of Lashana. And then Noah would also go up to Harold and say, like, hey, you know, we should get rid of Lashana because obviously these two are working together. Maybe he makes an argument for Duncan, you know, to try and get on Harold's good side, but that's not really, it's not going to do much, honestly, because, you know, he's still a very strong player. And with Courtney coming back, you know, having someone like Duncan to sort of combat Courtney would be a good thing to keep around. So Harold ultimately in confession states that he doesn't want to do this, but it is for the love of the game. It's that he's voting for Lashana. So him, Heather, Duncan, and Noah all vote for Lashana. And this would make more sense now because, you know, this was the episode where all the dirt was leaked. And then Lashana, I think she votes for Duncan, and Lashana goes home as a result of this. She's not too surprised because, you know, all the dirt got exposed. Harold obviously, you know, apologizes for voting for her, but, you know, she says it's all right, and don't hate the player, hate the game. All right, episode 17. 16 is not here, actually. I just realized that. Oh, it's right here. I guess apparently that's there. All right, so this episode 16 is the spy movie challenge. Again, this one doesn't matter. It's reward challenge. The bombs still blow up and they still get, you know, have to do the tomato bath. Okay, episode 17. This is the superhero movie challenge. This is actually when the merge is, which is, I'll just put everyone on the gaffers because I don't know. I won't change it because I'm lazy. So merge, superhero challenge. In terms of the competition, I don't know what the heck Noah's gonna make for his, but I think he just wouldn't care, honestly, because that's just kind of who he is. He would probably do something similar to what Duncan did, where he puts like no effort into his costume, so he's pretty much on the outs. Lindsay still wins the first part because, you know, Chris is kind of a stuck up to the Wonder Woman costume. So she gets the 10-second bonus where she doesn't starts 10 seconds late in her once she's on the course. But, you know, she still doesn't do great at it. She does pretty solid at it, but not great. Courtney is ultimately the one who still wins since she does have a lot of great physicality, and she gets immunity. In terms of the elimination, this is where Lashana got voted off, but I believe this is actually where Heather would now get voted off since, everyone pretty much hates her. Heather wants to try and keep her in there, obviously, because wanting to be, give her a second chance, but, it's pretty strong. Everyone has strong feelings against Heather. This is like the perfect time to get her out, pretty much. And with that, Heather goes home. Harold tells her, hey, I know this sucks for you, but, you played a lot better. You weren't as much of a jerk. You actually played more with your team. You actually backed me up, which is also pretty nice. And that's a step in the right direction. And Heather thanks him for this because even though she would not want some twerp to kind of prove a point basically, she still says thank you for all the help because it was appreciated. As she then goes to the limousine and tells Harold like, hey, good luck. Okay, episode 18. This is, again, another Aftermath episode, so nothing really changes here. Especially since it's both Lashana and Heather who got eliminated during this part. Episode 19, this is the Princess Fairy Tale Movie Challenge. And since we all know that Lindsay's foot didn't fit the glass slipper, Courtney would still be the princess. And then in terms of the Knights Challenge, I would say that Harold, Duncan, and Justin would still be the ones to fight for Courtney because Beth and Lindsay would get injured, and then Noah, he's just not good. He would not be good at this part of the challenge, but he wouldn't care. Then of course Duncan and Justin fall off, and Harold. I gotta remember the characters better. So Justin would still reach the top, but that's when Courtney baits the crap out of him, and then he falls. So Courtney would still get immunity since no one else reached her. And this would be the episode in which Justin would still get eliminated, finally putting his villainous run to an end. Alright, episode 20. This is the thriller crime episode where they have to figure out the death of Chris. Obviously, Duncan's the one who gets accused because, criminal, haha. Noah would be really good in this challenge since he's obviously very smart, and I believe it would have come down to these three figuring out who the killer was, and then ultimately it would be Lindsay who presents the argument, still kind of like taking some of Noah's credit, but I think Lindsay would get like 1 point where it like is like, aha, this is the key point, this is the main point in Chris's quote unquote murder. So Lindsay would still win the challenge. Noah would be pretty salty about it, but whatever. And since Lindsay would still take Duncan to go to the movies because she does feel bad for accusing him, and that still happens. There's not really much that happens during the movie since you have Miss Popular blonde girl and deviant criminal here going to the movies. It's not the best dynamic here, but I would say that Duncan would tell Lindsay, Courtney's a psycho. We got to get rid of Courtney because at this point, this is also around the time when Duncan starts to get tired of Courtney. She's just becoming way too psycho and way too corrupt. So he wants to find a way to, get rid of her. And Lindsay is a good person for that because Lindsay's, doesn't like Courtney at all. And Lindsay would agree to this. And so it wouldn't start like an alliance between these two, but it would like give that point across like, hey, we gotta keep our eyes out on Courtney because she's crazy. So 21, this is the, this is kind of, there's not really a general theme for this one. It's just general fame. So it's the guitar challenge, and then the red carpet, and then the destruction room challenge. So Duncan still wins the rock and roll challenge with the guitar, so he gets the VIP head start. And everyone doesn't really know how the red carpet challenge works, but it was basically, how to be the best performance on the red carpet for the paparazzi. And since, Chris told him, like, hey, just get across, everyone just still crosses. Noah would basically not care. He would just, like, have a straight face and continue walking across, and would get annoyed with all the paparazzi just as much as Duncan did. Harold, same thing. Beth would trip a lot. Courtney, same thing. And eventually, that's when it would be figured out that Lindsay would still win this portion. She gets the advantage in the final portion. But since Courtney is the one who is the most psychotic, she still wins the final challenge, which nets her immunity. So in terms of the vote, this is where it gets pretty interesting because no longer is Owen here since we have an extra person now. So he can't really influence the vote. And originally, this is the episode in which Lindsay got voted out because of the whole voice actor family emergency thing. But in this universe, that doesn't happen because while it was an unfortunate circumstance, and I'm glad that the show took action for that by eliminating Lindsay so that her voice actor can go deal with that. This time, it just wouldn't make sense. So now that Noah's here, so in terms of the vote, I would say that this is where everyone targets Noah because he's sort of an outcast. Not only is he super smart, he's kind of been flying his way through the competition, and Duncan would bring this up to Harold, and say like, hey, what if people pick Noah out of sympathy because he's the only one left, and even though Lindsay is tough competition with her popularity, we gotta get rid of Noah. Plus, this would make it seem like we weren't working with Noah, so that maybe this will give the girls a false sense of security. And I think Harold would agree with that. Plus, Beth is not really that much of a threat, and if they get rid of Noah, who's super smart, it really only comes down to Courtney. And, Lindsay is also a threat, but it's mostly based off her popularity, and Duncan kind of thinks that it's mostly just, a fluke, but, or whatever. So ultimately, it's Noah who gets sent home here, and he's pretty salty, but he's like, you know what? I made it this far. Screw all of you people. All right, episode 2. So this is the MMA, not the MMA one where they have to. This is the one where they go into the robots. They have to. It's like the kung fu one. So they go into the robots, and then the team that wins that portion goes to climb the mountain to retrieve the little tree thing. Since there's 5 people here, I would say that Chris would have the 3 girls do like a challenge where they have to prove who's the strongest, so they can determine who's the team that represents the girls. I would say Lindsay would probably fail this because even though she has proven to be physical, she isn't the strongest person, so it would come down to Courtney and Beth still as teammates. So Duncan and Harold would still win the robot boxing challenge. They would go to the mountain. They would still agree to split the cash. They'd make it to the finale. And obviously after Duncan makes fun of Lashana, Harold punches him in the face, which causes him to ultimately win and get that tree and the reward. Alright, so episode 23 is for some reason not here. I guess I forgot to put it there. So we'll just... I don't know. We'll just make that... Oops. How about this? We'll do this. There we go. So, episode 23, this is the space movie challenge. There's the one where they get stuck in the ship where there's 0 gravity, and eventually the alarm goes off, so they have to figure out what's that all about. And since Courtney's the one who still took action, I believe she'd be the one to turn off the alarm, which saves everyone, so she gets the advantage in the Vomit Comet challenge, where she gets to pick the order. And in terms of the order, it would still be as follows. Harold first, Duncan, or I think it was Lindsay who went next. Maybe it was Lindsay who goes first, but this is who I think she would pick. Lindsay first, Harold second, Duncan third, Beth fourth, and then her obviously going last. And that's when it was revealed. It's the Vomit Comet, which, obviously screws the crap out of Courtney. Alright, so Lindsay, we all know, has a weak stomach, so she wouldn't vomit, but she would definitely not survive long. I would say like maybe 5 seconds. Harold is a little bit better, would make it like 10 seconds. He doesn't vomit though. Then we get to Duncan, who makes it to 13 seconds. But I'm going to say this time he doesn't vomit because he has been proven to have a strong stomach. And this was basically to kind of like torture Courtney or something like that. Um, so Duncan does not vomit, but he only gets like 12 or 13 seconds this time. Beth would still go in, and because she would still get a higher time. I'm gonna say she gets 13 seconds, exactly the same. I know she made it all the way to 30, but like I don't know, that's kind of bullshit. There's just no way she made it to 30, and that was just kind of done to like prop up Beth a lot. But because I don't know, for some reason, Action thought that Beth was doing a whole lot, and she did do some good stuff. But I feel like this was just kind of over the top. And then Courtney would obviously go last, but since there's no vomit this time, she would do decently well, but she would only get like 11 seconds this time. So ultimately, in the end, Duncan does win, or well, Duncan and Beth tie since they got 13 seconds. So I don't know what Chris would do. I think just some dumb challenge where I don't know, Duncan would probably win because he's just the better player. So Duncan gets immunity, and now we go to elimination. So originally this is the episode where Harold went home, but I believe now that this wouldn't happen, and here's why. Since Beth is still here, or Lindsay's still here, this means Beth can't easily. That means Courtney would have a bigger target as well, since Lindsay is very popular with everybody, but no one wants to get rid of Lindsay. So she tries to go to Duncan to get rid of Harold, but this wouldn't budge. And Duncan's like, I'd rather get rid of Beth. Take out one of the strongest players, only allies left in the game. And Courtney agrees with that. Harold would most likely go on board with that since these two are now working together and have been for most of the season. So ultimately, these three vote for Beth. These two probably vote for Courtney, and ultimately Beth is the one who goes home. Beth and Lindsay are shocked, and Courtney kind of like taunts them a little bit. Beth just says like, good luck, Lindsay. I'm rooting for you in the rest of the challenge. All right, so episode 24. This is the one where they have to do the animal training one. Since Beth is not here anymore, Lindsay would just get her animal in replacement, which was the raccoon, and then Harold would just get Owen's animal, which was the bear. And in terms of who wins, it's easily Lindsay because the other three would just not do well. Like Duncan would obviously go insane from the camel, or not the camel, the chameleon going camouflage. Courtney kind of automatically lost because it's a freaking shark. And then Harold, he would just overthink the whole thing with the bear and just constantly get himself hurt. So Lindsay is the one who wins the animal challenge and gets immunity. In terms of the vote, since Owen originally got kicked off as well, since the whole mole thing was exposed, this means that this would be a double elimination challenge, and Chris would announce that to the contestants. So Courtney would obviously advocate to Duncan to get rid of Harold, since Lindsay has immunity, and Duncan agrees with it, but he actually is going to get rid of Courtney, and this is where he goes up to Lindsay and says, "Hey, perfect opportunity to finally get rid of Courtney," and as well as Duncan and Harold would realize that one of them has to go, so because Lindsay has immunity, and I believe Harold would step up and say, "Hey, I'll take the fall here. You're the stronger player. I was wrong about you for a couple things and was just trying to be a stronger player," and Duncan would be like, you're actually pretty useful in some aspects. You actually do have some skills, even though you are still a little twerp. But, I was wrong about you in the past. So they kind of have like a little nice, wholesome bro moment. Excuse me. They have that little wholesome bro moment before the elimination. And in terms of the votes, these three would vote for Courtney, and Courtney would vote for Harold. So Courtney is fourth place, and Harold gets third. Courtney is an absolute shock and complete speechless about Duncan voting for her, and that's what Duncan says. Like, yeah, you're just crazy. You're psycho. You should not be in the finale. And then you're the one who also wrote that freaking 25-page essay about how to be a good boyfriend. And then she's like, "We are so done." And then Duncan's like, "Yeah, you're right. We are done." And he tells her, "Yeah, we're done. I'm breaking up with you. Screw you." And then when Harold eventually comes down, Duncan says, "Thanks for the help." Harold says, "No problem. Oh, and by the way, I hope you win this thing." And even though, it's weird for Harold to say something like that, because since those two have been working together and since they actually have more respect for each other, Harold would probably, say something like that because, that's just who he is. He's a honorable person. And now we are here at the finale. So this finale is kind of strange because it's like in two parts. The first one is the one where more focuses on Chef and Chris because they got into that huge argument. So Duncan and Lindsay would still do the same strategy that Beth and Duncan did originally, which was to throw certain challenges so that they could slow it down as much as possible to where eventually Chris and Chef make up so that it would be a lot easier for them to tie and get so that they can split the cash since that was the original plan. But that obviously doesn't work because Chris doesn't find that to be very fun ending. So they go to the next episode, which is the one where they have to deal with everyone's little small challenges to get their vote. And we'll just put them up here. So it's Courtney, Harold, Beth, Noah, Justin, Heather, LaShawna, Owen, and then Tyler in terms of the jury votes since they were the last 9 eliminated. So most of the challenges that they have are the same. I think Noah wouldn't care. Heather wouldn't care because, they're still salty that they're not up there. And it really kind of doesn't matter because, it still comes down to a vote. And now it's time to determine who would vote for who. Since DJ's not in the jury vote this time, his vote doesn't count. Because I wasn't originally going to put him here, but his vote was just weird that he just voted for Beth, even though he's friends with Duncan, but whatever. So we'll go down the list. Tyler votes for Lindsay, obviously. Owen votes for Duncan. LaShawna would vote for Lindsay because she still hates Duncan. Heather would vote for Duncan because of her hatred for Lindsay. Justin's a strange one. Maybe Lindsay. I don't know. Maybe he might vote Duncan out of spite for Lindsay. Or I don't know. He doesn't hate Lindsay, but this is definitely one of the harder ones. Noah would vote for Lindsay because he hated Duncan. I'm gonna say Justin votes for Duncan. So now it's 3-3 vote. Beth would vote for Lindsay, obviously. Harold would vote for Duncan in this case because he would originally vote for Lindsay, but he would vote for Duncan this time because he wants him to win. And then Courtney would obviously vote for Duncan because, she still thinks that they're somewhat together. So in the end, Duncan is the winner of action and Lindsay is the runner-up in the canon ending. So Duncan's all happy. Courtney tries to go hug him in celebration. But he's like, oh, not so fast. And even after a kiss, Duncan says, no, we're done. You're crazy. You're psycho. I know I kind of, made you this way a little bit, but, you've let this crap get to your head and it will turn into like a huge drama thing where Chris would just kind of let it happen because, drama. And so Duncan and Courtney officially break up this time because, I don't know, it was so weird how they did it where, it just felt like they weren't broken up. But now this time they officially break up and Courtney is just, pissed. Lindsay congratulates Duncan on the win and Duncan's like, you actually made up a good competitor, sorry that you lost, yada, yada, yada. Duncan would not give her the money anyways, but, Lindsay's okay with that because, he is the winner. It is now his money. Now, if it was the alternate ending where Lindsay wins this time, Duncan would be a little bit salty, but, it is Lindsay. She actually did do pretty good this season, and it makes sense. She's popular or whatever. He would still break up with Courtney, and then, he would, I think he would still congratulate Lindsay on the win. And Lindsay, I would say, would give up some of the money to him. Okay, stop with the fuck. I know, get out of here. I'll deal with that later. Anyways, so Duncan would thank Lindsay for, the small cash that she gave her because Lindsay would kind of feel bad for Duncan at that. And with that, that is the conclusion to Total Drama Action Alternate Universe. Hope you guys enjoyed. What would you have changed? And that's about it. Talk to you guys later. Peace.